What's good, fellas? Welcome to another episode of Last Cut Farm Team, the podcast. At least this is, Last Cut Farm Team, the channel. First things first, I want to send well wishes to Jorge Mateo. This week he suffered a left elbow subluxation, I believe. It was essentially a dislocation where it popped out and popped back into place. He's on the IL at a minimum of 3 weeks, but that seems unlikely. I just want to, on behalf of Marlins fans, because I don't know if anybody said this or not, get well soon. Injuries suck, especially for a player as underrated and as good as him. He might actually be my guy this week. Anyway, trade deadlines in a couple days, so trade season is in full effect. That's mainly what I wanted to talk about today. So Miami kind of kicked everything off by trading AJ Puck to the Diamondbacks, which, if I'm being honest, I like that trade a lot for a lot of reasons. I felt AJ Puck was a solid acquisition. Honestly, at the time, I didn't really like the trade when we traded JJ to Oakland for AJ Puck. It was one of those things where I didn't feel at the time that we needed the help in the bullpen, and I felt we had decent pitching and hitting was what we were missing. That said, JJ Bleday is having a terrific year this year, but last year he did not have so good a year, and AJ Puck was a mainstay in that bullpen and was very helpful in getting us to the postseason appearance that we had. So, AJ, I don't know if you're going to listen to this, but if you do, thank you. We love you down here in Miami. Gave us some headaches, but there were good times and bad. So, I wish you best in your career. Hope you get a ring at some point soon. Anyway, we got back a couple offensive guys that have good profile, good upside. One of them, Davison De Los Santos, is a power guy, big power guy. Everything I've been seeing is kind of hyping up his power, and the fact that he has 28 home runs in the minors, and I believe leads the minor leagues in home runs. That's impressive in and of itself, the 28 home runs, but he does play in Reno, so his power numbers are exaggerated there. Anyway, I looked at his home and road splits this season. He has 18 homers at home in about 45 games, I think, when I checked, and 10 on the road, which tells me he's still got 30 home run potential. That's not a bad thing by any means. I think he has good upside. My concern with him is that when he gets to the majors, because he's not necessarily a defensive guy, he is purely a hitter, and a power guy at that, which is a need for Miami, another Jorge Soler type. You just hope he has a little more consistency than Soler in that regard. But my worry is that he's going to be exposed by major league pitching, because it's the biggest jump from AAA to the MLB. And there's a reason that some guys flame out and others don't. Look at Lewis Brinson. I, wished the best for him, and I hope he's doing good now. But when he came up, he just nothing. It didn't click. It felt like it might have in his, his fourth season with us, or whatever it was, third or fourth season. When he was primed to get more time, and he got released or traded or DFA'd or whatever happened to him. He just kind of went quietly into the night. Again, I hope he's doing well. But back to De Los Santos, I love the idea of getting a pure power guy in the lineup, because we all love Jazz. Well, love or hate, but love Jazz's profile and appreciate the fact that he can pump out, a 25-25 season, if not more. 25-30, maybe even a 30-30. But he's not going to, everybody knows Jazz isn't going to get you 40 home runs unless you play for the New York Yankees. And he has that short porch. Or the Boston Red Sox, and he has the pesky pole to play with. But what I'm getting at here is injecting a power hitter into the lineup is only going to be good. I mean, look at what Stanton did for us, for the offense in particular. Back in 17, we had a crazy good offense that year. He brings up everybody around him because everybody's scared to pitch to, at the time, Stanton. So Marcell Ozuna was getting more cookies. The only guy that didn't do as well when Stanton was in Miami was Yelich. And I don't think that's a knock on him necessarily. That was just a weird down year. Once we traded him to Milwaukee and he was in a very hitter-friendly ballpark, we all saw what happened. He became an MVP. Should have been a 2-time MVP. Might potentially be in the conversation this year if he heats up down the home stretch. I know he missed like the first month of the season, but he was an all-star starter. So, anything can happen at this point. If he does get exposed in, the major leagues, it's going to be another Lewin Diaz. And that's disappointing. Although, to Lewin's credit, he had a very, very good glove. And, he's a potential gold glove defender, but without providing the offense, that's a problem. De Los Santos's whiff rate in the minors was up above 40%. I want to say 42%. And my fear is that pitchers are going to exploit that by throwing good sweepers and sliders and, setting him up with fastballs up and in to throw a slider, a sweeper down and away, getting him with changeups when he has, the matchup advantage with facing left-handed pitching. Although one thing I did notice looking at his stats was that he has reverse splits. Let me pull up his splits again real quick. All right, so I got the splits pulled up. He had reverse splits in both AA and AAA. In AA, he just tore up both lefties and righties. He had a 376 average against righties and a 348 average against lefties. And obviously he had a lot more at-bats against righties than lefties. He only had 27 plate appearances as opposed to 135 against righties. But in AAA, his splits are a little different. His average against righties is a 320 and against lefties is a 171. I don't know if this points to an inability from him to recognize the changeup out of a left-hander's hand. I'm not sure if that's the pitch that's getting him or if it's just a lack of experience facing quality left-handed pitching. But that is something that concerns me. His walk rate is pretty low. I think it's 5%, right around there somewhere. And his strikeout rate is it's down from last year. I think it's at 22% this year. But it's still, higher than you'd like. If he can keep that around 20% and just develop the discipline to not chase down and away. It's the same thing that happened with Stanton. When Stanton figured out that pitchers were trying to get him to chase the down and away fastball, he excelled a bit more. He was able to take those pitches, and there was a time, I think it was the season prior, where he kind of had to learn the hard way, where he just got a little too disciplined and would strike out on fastballs down the middle just by looking at them. And I think that was him overthinking. Once he kind of came into his own, in that 2017 season, he excelled. Then he obviously went to the Yankees and had injury issues, which is a shame because he was a surefire Hall of Famer. He still might be if he gets to 400, 500 home runs. You never know. But those injuries are a shame. Same thing happened to Griffey Jr. Same thing's happening to Mike Trout right now, where surefire Hall of Famer. Although Trout and Griffey, they're definitely getting in. Stanton's a definitely maybe kind of guy in my eyes, but nevertheless, back on topic here. The other guy we got, by the way, De Los Santos slots in as our top position player in our top 30 prospects. He slots in at 4 behind the three pitchers, Max Meyer, Thomas White, and Noble Meyer in reverse order. Noble Meyer being 1, Max Meyer being 3, which those three are going to head a rotation. It's going to be a three-headed monster, especially if, hopefully Miami can keep Sandy. Hopefully, but I don't expect them to. I feel like we're going to just let his contract expire once it's done or trade him prior to that. I don't think we're going to have him long term, which is disappointing. Yeah, the other guy we got in the AJ Puck trade was Andrew Pintar. He's an outfielder, and he had some injury issues in college. He had some injury issues so far in the pros, but he has decent upside. He's quick. He's got a good couple stolen bases. I think this year it was like 19 or so, or am I misremembering? No, it was 19 between 3 teams. So I don't know if that's 3 levels. Yeah, between rookie ball, high A, and double A, he's got 19 stolen bases. Most of those came in high A, where he has 17. 9 home runs in high A and a 304 average. That's a pretty good little stat line. You hope that can continue. This year he's hitting 285 with 9 home runs, 3 triples, and 15 doubles between the 3 leagues, as well as I said, those 19 stolen bases. So all in all, pretty good. He's only striking out a few more. He has a few more strikeouts than walks. 42 walks on the season with 58 Ks. That would translate pretty well. This is all in 69 games, by the way. So you're looking at, if he was able to translate those numbers to the majors, you're probably looking at about 120-ish strikeouts, and I don't think it would be nearly close to 80 walks, probably closer to 60, but that speaks to a good eye and plate discipline. And probably also the fact that he's tearing it up this year. They just want to pitch around him because he was probably the biggest threat in high A in that lineup. But it looks like an all-around guy, a Yelich type kind of build, I guess. Because I mean, he's 6'1", 190, so he's pretty average size. But you hope that he can stay healthy and keep producing. He could be a pretty good contributor to the Marlins at some point, and you hope he does. Anyway, moving on from that trade, I wanted to kind of shine some light on the couple trades that the Tampa Bay Rays made. I live in the Bay Area, so they are the team that is shoved down my throat, I say as affectionately as I can. They traded Randy Arozarena to the Mariners, which some people saw coming, some people saw him on the market. I was hoping he wasn't, but alas, he is gone. Funny story, a coworker of mine was telling me about how his kids were supposed to go to a Randy Arozarena baseball camp like next week or something. It was like in the very near future, and they got an email right after the trade saying, we're going to get back to you on that. They like already paid and everything, and it's unfortunate. I'm sure somebody's going to fill in, maybe Brandon Lau or Josh Lowe or somebody. But the Rays, in spite of being around 500, are sellers just because of the Rays model, which makes me worry for the Marlins' future. Anyway, I'm getting kind of deep into this, so I'm just kind of going to touch on this briefly. They acquired Aiden Smith, Brody Hopkins, and a player to be named later for that trade. Aiden Smith looked pretty good. When he was drafted by the Mariners, scouts called him one of the best pure hitters in the class, and they got in the high school class. Let me specify. So he has room to develop. Also, his birthday was this past week on the 23rd. So happy birthday, Aiden. Welcome to Tampa. Hopefully you'll perform well for the Rays. James Paxton, who's been pretty good with the Dodgers this year, ended up going back to the Red Sox. They acquired him for an infielder, Moises Bolivar. I don't know much about Bolivar, so I can't really speak to him. What I'm reading is that he's been pretty good. He's a 17-year-old Venezuelan player. So, it's going to be a couple years, maybe 6 or 7, before we see any kind of I guess, resolution, and we can kind of figure out who won that trade, although it seems like it's a win-win project for one and a reclamation project for the other. Speaking of reclamation projects, the Orioles traded Austin Hayes, which is a big name and kind of surprised me to see him leave Baltimore, for Sir Anthony Dominguez and Christian Pache. Pache was a prospect for the Braves, I believe, and I remember, yes, top former prospect for the Braves. I remember playing MLB The Show and hating him because of how skilled he was, because obviously Marlins fan, I would play with the Marlins. But he ended up in Philly, and he has not been performing that good this year. He's hitting .202, his batting average in 118 plate appearances. He's kind of been like a fourth or fifth bat in the outfield, which, I mean, there's a use for. He's quick. I don't know. He's one of those guys where I could see him turn it around, but it feels like he's just going to be a speed guy off the bench. It's a win-win for Baltimore. Sir Anthony Dominguez is an interesting piece going to Baltimore to shore up their bullpen. Not that they, haven't followed Baltimore that closely, but you can always use more arms in the bullpen. Mariners got Yimi Garcia. Always happy to see another former Marlin in the news on the move. They got a couple prospects, an outfielder and a catcher. I don't know anything about them, and I'm not going to spend too much time on them. Orioles this morning, because I'm recording this on Saturday, acquired Zach Eflin and cash from the Rays for infielder Mac Horvath, pitcher Jackson Baumeister, and outfielder Matthew Etzel. I kind of glanced at those three. Seems like the first two that I mentioned, Horvath and Baumeister, are top 30 prospects for the Orioles, or were, I should say. I don't know how they slot into the Rays system. I don't think they've updated the prospect list. I don't see them on here. But that'll be... I mean, that's just scary. The Orioles just keep getting better. They keep getting new arms. I'm still holding out hope that we somehow swing a deal to get Kobe Mayo. I want Kobe Mayo, but I don't think we have the opportunity. I do want to potentially touch on trade fits where I see people landing from the Marlins. That would be, Josh Bell, Tanner Scott, and maybe Jazz Chisholm. Alright, I am recording this Sunday night after the Jazz Chisholm trade. He has moved to the Yankees. I just wanted to take the time to kind of mention this. We got a couple guys back for the trade. I like the package we got with the catcher and the shortstop, the two shortstops. I would love to see the second baseman, I don't have it in front of me, Cerna, I believe. I would love to see him turn into what he is projected to be, kind of a Dustin Pedroia type, but we'll kind of need to see the catcher, if he can shore up the defense, or at least if we can keep Nick Fortes as a defensive catcher on the roster. I think it'll just be a good thing for us moving forward. And finally, the last trade, the most recent trade that has happened today, is that the Mets acquired Ryan Stanek from the Mariners for Rylan Thomas. I, again, don't know anything about them. Stanek, I mean, he's a decent arm for the bullpen, and again, you can always use more arms. I don't like to see the Mets getting better because I am, again, a Marlins fan. But, I hope everyone does well and settles in well to their new cities and new teams and new cultures and new locker rooms, because Lord knows that's a difficult process. Onward to Jorge Mateo, who is this week's underrated player of the week. I'm going to pull up his stats real quick on Savant, and we will see how he looks. He's one of those guys where, whenever I do a franchise, he always ends up on my team somehow. Either they offer him in a trade to me, his stats aren't crazy any which way, but yeah, looking at it, I mean, he's 99th percentile for speed, so that speed is always going to play. His base running value is top tier. Fielding seems pretty average, which arm strength middle of the pack, range middle of the pack, but he's just consistent, man, and he can play a lot of positions. He's got good bat speed at 72.4 miles per hour, and his whiff rate is low. So, and his K rate's, arguably middle of the pack, but not too bad at 23.1%. The whiff rate at 22%, 22.9% is not terrible. You'd like to see that chase rate lower and the squared up rate higher, but he's just one of those guys where a solid underrated player. Again, he's kind of been in my mind just because of that it was an ugly injury. Yeah, his offensive stats have been low, but I just feel like he's a guy who you kind of just have to respect. Not necessarily offensively so much, but he just brings you value in other aspects of the game. He's an all-around player. Seems to be a pretty good guy, too. Pretty short this week for underrated player of the week. I didn't want to spend too much time on it because of the trade deadline. So I'm going to dip back into the Marlins. This week is going to be a pretty important week in Marlins history. There will be some seismic shaking up and some pieces that are going to move that you probably don't expect to move. I was looking at placements for Josh Bell first, just because of the fact that he was kind of first on my mind. And I have teams ranks by position by WAR. Number 30 is Houston, which, yeah, since they since they acquired Jose Abreu, he's underwhelmed. They have John Singleton, who is a great comeback, bounce-back story, but, he can only do so much. He's an older, I don't even want to call him a prospect anymore. He's in his 30s, 32, I believe, 32, 33, something like that. Again, great bounce-back story, but I feel like Josh Bell might actually fit in there pretty decently. They need a bat more than anything at a first base, and, I mean, they're trying to make a push, so that would be a good fit. It's already a championship culture. All he needs to do is fit in, fall in line with them, and he'd be off and running. Switch hitter. He's got the Crawford boxes from the right side. He can take advantage of that, and he's just a quality hitter. He wouldn't hit too high in that lineup because they already have a lot of pieces, and you could even use him as an extra bat if you needed to. But he's just, again, a quality player, good locker room guy. He's not a good glove by any means, but he is, especially right now, he's on a hot streak. He's picking it up. He just had his thousandth career hit in Milwaukee. It was a home run, an opposite field home run that he hit from the left side against a right-handed pitcher. But yeah, opposite field home run. Another team that could use Josh Bell is, I'm going to kind of touch on three. I think Milwaukee and Pittsburgh are good fits. Milwaukee just because he could eat there. They have Rhys Hoskins right now and Jake Bauers, who they're pretty halfway decent on their own. Rhys Hoskins torched the Marlins for years when he was with Philly. So I have opinions on him, which is a compliment to an opposing player. Same way I have opinions on Freddie Freeman and other guys who have torched the Marlins over the years. But I feel like Bell could fit in there. Any hitter can fit in Milwaukee because of that ballpark. The balls fly there. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. The balls fly. So you'd get a good bit of power production out of him, especially as a switch hitter. Pittsburgh also, it just makes sense to me. Have him go back to where he started his career. He is performing well, and once he gets back in that ballpark, who knows? He might have a true career resurgence where it feels familiar, and he remembers the, 36 home run season he had, and it just makes sense. It just clicks for him. Ultimately, it would be nice to see him end up back in Pittsburgh and execute well there. A dark horse candidate is New York for me, the Yankees, not the Mets, because of the fact that they're actually 29th in WAR amongst first basemen. Anthony Rizzo is there, and he's healthy and back, but he's also, he's getting older, he's getting up there, and you can always use another bat in the lineup, especially a switch hitting bat, especially a power hitting switch hitting bat. So I'd look for them to be involved in conversations, but only if there was another piece, maybe a Tanner Scott, because Tanner Scott going to New York makes sense. Josh Bell going there doesn't so much, but he could sweeten the pot a little bit to get the Marlins something else back. And finally, Tanner Scott, who hopefully, we get the chance to move to a team in the hunt. You would think, obviously, I mean, it's almost a guarantee it's going to happen. You just hope he gets something back decent, because it is a rental. You're not going to get a super high value worth out of the rental, but he's going to provide you innings. He's going to provide you leverage innings, which is important, and playoff assistance, playoff help. Interesting tidbit, not interesting, but just funny to me. Looking at the WAR rankings by team, of course Colorado's last for pitching by 2 WAR points. Anyway, looking at relief pitchers, the teams that could use relievers are the Mets, but again, they just acquired a piece. I don't know. I feel like you can get a good ticket or a good little haul for Tanner Scott, just because he's essentially the only high leverage lefty on the market. I don't know exactly what we'll be able to get in return for, again, a rental of a reliever. But I feel like we're going to be able to get something more than people expect, just because of the fact that he's a high leverage lefty. And there are a lot of teams that need high leverage left-handed pitching. Again, like the Yankees, that's one team. The Mets could use him. Pittsburgh could probably use him, although I believe, isn't Aroldis Chapman in Pittsburgh now? Is he there? Aroldis Chapman. Who's he with? Yeah, he's with the Pirates. Yeah, I don't know how he's performing, but I mean, again, you can never use enough arms. Baltimore is another team that I could see making a move for Tanner Scott. I could see him going back to Baltimore, and that would be a nice little fleecing by the Marlins, who acquired him originally for a primary player, and to send him right back to finish out his deal would be suiting, and you would hope that he could win a chip there. Seattle and LA are kind of the other two teams that I'm looking at right now. I could be completely wrong with this, but I feel like he's most likely going to end up in pinstripes. I've just heard a lot of talk about it, and it's a good fit. It makes sense, and you could they have a wealth of hitting talent in their minor league system, especially shortstops, which is an area of need for Miami. So I feel like that is maybe not a match made in heaven, but definitely a match made on Tinder. we can mess some stuff up there. But yeah, man, with that, I think that'll conclude this week's episode. Thank you guys for watching, or listening, I guess, technically. Shout out to Jorge Mateo. Get well soon. Hopefully, you get a chip this year. Or somebody will. Anyway, thank you. I'm Chad. Have a good old day.